think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Farley, and I am one of JRSA's research associates. For those of you who are less familiar with JRSA, it stands for Justice Research and Statistics Association. We are a national nonprofit organization dedicated to the use of research and analysis to inform criminal and juvenile justice decision-making, and we are comprised of a network of researchers and practitioners, which at the core includes directors and staff from state statistical analysis centers. So it is my pleasure today to welcome you to a webinar on web scraping, and this will be presented by Matthew Studenberg. He graduated from the University of Maryland in 2013 and has created several web scrapers, and the resulting data has been used to win class action lawsuits, find houses with higher water bills, and expunge criminal records. He has won several awards, including the ABA's On the Rise Top 40 Young Lawyers and the Maryland Bar Foundation's Award for the Advancement of the Rights of the Disadvantaged. Matthew is currently the IT Director and a staff attorney at the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service and continues to strive to merge technology and the law for the benefit of low-income individuals. So welcome, Matthew. Before we go any further, I do want to thank our partners at the Bureau of Justice Statistics for helping to make this webinar possible. And I would also like to cover a few logistical items. Okay, so we will be recording today's session for future playback. The link to the recording will be posted on JRSA's website and emailed to attendees and those on the waiting list. Today's webinar is being audio cast via both the speakers on your computer and teleconference. If you have speakers on your computer or headphones and you are not the presenter, we recommend listening to the webinar using your computer speakers or headphones. To access the audio conference, select audio from the top menu bar and then select audio conference. Once the audio conference window appears, you can view the teleconference call-in information or join the audio conference via your computer. Okay, if you have any questions and you want to communicate with JRSA staff, we encourage you to submit them using the chat feature on the right side of your screen. Please select, if you select on that, and you can go all the way down to all participants. That way we can see, everyone can see all the questions. This session is scheduled for about an hour. If you do have any technical difficulties or get disconnected, just try and reconnect the way you originally have. If you still find that you're having problems, you can reach out to our tech guru, which is Jason Trask, and he is available at jtrask@jrsa.org. In the last 5 minutes of the webinar, we will ask you to complete a short survey, and this information helps us to plan and improve future webinars and to meet our reporting requirements. And then one last thing, we do have and are aware that some people use one computer but have multiple viewers, and so we're trying to track the number of attendees. So if you have a group of people that are watching this webinar, if you don't mind, if you could go to the chat window, type the name of the person registered and the total number of additional people in the room, that would really help us keep track of who's attending our webinars, and we would greatly appreciate it. So again, if you have any questions as we're going through, just put them into the chat, making sure to select all participants. And as Matthew's sort of going through his presentation, I will chime in here and there to ask him the question. So I think with that, I will pass it over to Matthew, and we can get started. Welcome.
All right, thank you. All right, can you see the screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Matthew Studenberg. I'm the IT director of a group called Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service here in Maryland. I'm also a staff attorney, and I always like to speed through these biographies. But just briefly, I graduated with a BA in political science from the University of Maryland in Baltimore County in 2009. and with a law degree from the University of Maryland School of Law in 2013. And the reason I bring this up is I'm primarily a self-taught coder with a focus in kind of back-end web development, web scraping. And so if any of this interests you, you know, I wouldn't give up hope just because you didn't get a degree in computer science, right? My degree was in political science. So anybody can learn this stuff. If you don't have to be kind of a savant from age 5. So I'm going to be talking today about web scrapers, which is a really great way to gather data that exists out there, but isn't in a form that you can actively analyze it or go through it. And so I have a couple of examples, but before I do, I'm going to jump into exactly what a web scraper is. And in order to go over what a web scraper is, I first have to kind of cover how using a website normally works. And so when you normally use a web page, you go to something like google.com, and you first open a browser, and then you go to google.com, and let's say you're trying to find some great webinars. What you do is you type great webinars into the search box and click search. What your browser does is it will take that information, the fact that you typed great webinars into the text box, the fact that you clicked the Google search button, and any other boxes or options you may have checked. Your browser then will condense all of that into some computer code that it will then send to the server that's hosting the website. And what the server does with that is the server will say, okay, it looks like this person is searching great webinars. They click the Google search box, not the I'm feeling lucky box. The settings are set for this. Google has kind of their magic sauce where they go out and they find the website you're looking for. And ultimately what the server does is it then returns a web page to be viewed on your browser. And then that's how you get the pretty website with all of the great webinar links out there. And that server gives the data back in a form called HTML. And HTML is a computer language that is what websites are built out of. And HTML is designed to be displayed in a browser. It contains, you can kind of see a small snippet here in the bottom left-hand corner of what some HTML looks like. And a browser reads that to figure out where the link should go, what color the text should be, things like that. So that's how using the internet works normally on a web browser. So how does building a web scraper differ from that? Well, the primary thing is that it cuts out the human interaction piece, right? You're not actually typing in great webinars or clicking any buttons. And in fact, it removes the entire browser completely. The web scraper kind of comes into this whole process at the point after where the web browser would collect all that data, put it into kind of some packets designed to go to the server. So what the web scraper essentially does is mimic the information that is sent from the web browser to the server. The server doesn't know whether it's a web browser that's sending it information, a web scraper, or anything like that. And so when the web server gets gets information, it processes it just like anything else. And so it'll get the exact same information sent to it from a web browser from the web scraper instead. The server will, let's say it's the Google server, it will do the same kind of analysis. It'll find the cases or it'll find the links to the websites that you want to visit, and will return all of those results in the HTML format that it would normally, thinking that it's going to be displayed into a web browser. What a web scraper then does with that HTML, instead of displaying it, since there is no browser for it to be displayed in, it actually analyzes and scans through that HTML looking for specific things. And the web scraper is usually designed to look for something specific, and I have some examples of how to do that. But it will scan through the HTML looking for whatever piece of information it wants, and then save that information into a database. And there's some really useful applications for this type of web scraper here. And so there's a number of really popular web scrapers out there that might kind of make a little bit more sense out of this. So the biggest and most popular web scraper by far is the Google web scraper, right? So when you go to Google and you type in baseball, how does Google actually know all the websites that contain the words baseball or that are about baseball? Well, there's a number of different ways, but the primary way is that Google has web scrapers that scour the entire internet. and let's say you start a web page about baseball, Google will eventually find your web page with their web scraper. It will scan all the contents of your website, and it'll say, hey, the word baseball here is listed 45 times, and there seem to be a lot of other indicators that this is a website about baseball. Let's save that in the database. Then when you search the word baseball, it goes to the Google database and says, hey, we have these 10 websites that all mention baseball. Here are the websites they probably want to go to. And so that's one of the most popular and kind of biggest uses of web scrapers, at least in a commercial sense when it comes to Google. And then if you've seen the sites like Trivago or Priceline or Kayak where they will compare a lot of different options all at once. You know, you could find the cheapest hotel, right? Well, the way these sites do that is you go to their website. You say, hey, I'm trying to find a hotel between March 1st and March 3rd in Miami. You know, what's the cheapest hotel rate? Well, what these websites will do is that using a web scraper, it'll take the data that you gave the web scraper and go to all of the hotels that it has listed in Miami. And using that same time frame, March 1st to March 3rd, see what the prices are that come back. It then goes through it all and says, here are the 5 cheapest options. And then finally, just as another kind of example of a commercial web scraper is Venmo, which is a popular money transfer app on a lot of phones. And what you do is you connect Venmo to your bank account. And interestingly, a lot of banks don't have kind of nice APIs to connect everything. And so what you need in order to, for Venmo, the app, to be able to pull money out of your account or put money into it, is they actually need your credentials, which is why you give them your username and password. And using a web scraper, they then go to Capital One or you know, Covia or something, and almost pretending to be you, log into your account using a web scraper. And then they have pre-programmed instructions on how to pull out money, how to send money, and the like. And so there's a lot of different programs people use on a daily basis that all rely very heavily on web scrapers. So that kind of gives some background information as to how they've been used in the past. But this is for, you know, kind of research and statistic purposes. And so I have 2 big examples that we accomplished here at MVLS that analyzed some public data using web scrapers and some statistics that didn't exist before. So the first one I want to go over here is some water bill data that we were able to collect. And usually when I tell this, people say, wait, why is collecting water bill data important at all? Well, in Baltimore City, water bills over $750 will result in a tax sale of the house in order to pay for that water bill. And so if you're you know, an elderly person and let's say you own your house outright, and let's say unfortunately your spouse recently passed away and they were the ones who took care of paying the water bill. So you lose track of it, the water bill starts to add up, and maybe you're on Social Security, and so it becomes very difficult to pay back a bill of $500 or $600 or $700 or $800. And then what that puts you at risk at is losing the house that you have already paid off just to pay off an $800 water bill. So this is something that typically plagues a lot of people in Baltimore City that we wanted to see, that we wanted to try to prevent. So Baltimore City has all of the water bill information public. And how they make it public is they don't have it in a downloadable database. You can't just download an Excel file of everybody's water bill. But what they do have is they have a website where you can type in an address and you can get the current water bill. So here we have, this is the address I lived when I was in law school. And if we type it in here, this is the information of the web page that is returned. And so you can see one of the pieces of information here that's displayed is the current water bill balance. And so, you know, it looks like my old landlord owes $360 on his water bill. And so the question we were trying to answer is, because this data is publicly available, is there a way to figure out how many houses are at risk of being sold at tax sale to pay a water bill? And then on top of that, how many people are close to that line, how many people would be affected if legislation changed to move that number up or down some. And this was data that didn't exist anywhere before. And so what we needed to do in order to get all this data is to use a web scraper. And so the first thing we needed to do is, if you noticed on the website, you could search by address number. And so we had to find a list of every address in Baltimore City in order to feed it into this web scraper we were going to create. Now, luckily and conveniently for us, Baltimore City did publish a giant Excel sheet of all of the property taxes in Baltimore City, which conveniently contained the addresses for every property in Baltimore City. So here's a kind of a screenshot of that, and it contained 238,000 addresses. And so this made life kind of significantly easier for us. And so you can see there's a whole bunch of addresses here, and it goes on for 238,000 rows. So now we had that piece of the puzzle solved. We had a list of all the addresses. So the next piece was to actually build the web scraper. So the steps that go into building a web scraper aren't too difficult. What you have to do is you have to see what the information looks like as it goes from the browser when you do a normal search of a house to the server that hosts that website, in this case the water bill website. And so that's exactly what I did, except I used the Chrome browser, and Chrome, most browsers have some kind of tool, and Chrome is no different, has a tool that you can use to monitor what kind of traffic is going between the browser and the server. And so I activated that tool, and it comes pre-installed in any browser, so anybody can do that. And I did a normal search. I typed in that same address that I already knew and saw what kind of traffic was sent from the browser to the server. And you can kind of see pieces of it right here. It was more than one page, unfortunately. But all of this information is all packed into kind of one condensed computer code, and is then sent over to the server. And that's what the server uses to determine what address I'm trying to look up. So by going through all the information that is sent to the server, there was one particular variable name here that had the address that I typed. You can see it here at the bottom of your screen. It's this very long, CT100 $, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And then you can see the text here is 834 Holland Street, which was the address that I typed in. So using that variable, I could now build a program that simply added whatever address I wanted to that variable. So instead of 834, we could replace it with 123 Main Street, or whatever address we deemed fit. So on the right-hand side is some of the code that I used to actually build the web scraper. And you'll notice it's actually not that much. These web scrapers, they take a little bit of time, but they're not complicated where you need teams and teams of people to build them. And if you are curious, all this code is available online, so anybody can go online and see how to scrape the Baltimore City water bill website. And what this code does is it mimics just enough of the information that comes from the web browser to make it look like it's a request from a web browser. So you don't actually have to copy everything. You just need to copy enough because the server doesn't necessarily look at everything. So with some trial and error, I figured out what the server was looking for, and that's the stuff that I duplicated. And so a lot of this is just kind of information that was sent that is kind of not really relevant. And then if you kind of squint your eyes, since it's kind of small, you can see that this variable right here is the same variable that contained the address. And we're able to then put in any address that we want and send that, that information off to the server. The server reads it as if it's any browser looking up any kind of address, and then we'll send back the HTML for our program to display. So now that's kind of where the next step comes in. Since we're not actually using a browser, right? There's no HTML, there's no place for the HTML to be displayed. So what we have to do is we have to take a look at the HTML and figure out where this current balance is where it is in the HTML. All right, so the HTML contains everything that you can see on your browser. And so we looked through the HTML, and lo and behold, there was this one tag right here. It's a span tag that contained the value $360.32. And we, this particular project was made very convenient for us because it had an ID in the span tag, with this really long kind of thing, and ended with current balance, so we knew we were on the right track. But what an ID tag lets you do is find that tag very quickly and easily using a computer program. It's not always as easy as that, and so we were able to use this code right here, which is what we built, to basically, as the HTML comes back from the web scraper, look through all that HTML and find the one span tag in the HTML that has this ID, then get the value, whatever's in between the two span tags, and that will be whatever the current balance is. And so this, just to get the current balance wasn't actually all that difficult to do. So at that point, we had the web scraper that would take an address, go to the water bill website, get the HTML, look through the HTML, or parse the HTML is the proper terminology, and find the current balance. And so then all we needed to do in order to pull out all of the water bill information is just put it into a giant loop. So we had this giant Excel sheet, and we built another small program that basically just passed one address at a time to our web scraper. The web scraper would take the address, add it to that information that gets sent to the server, retrieve the HTML that the server sends back, look through it, get the current balance, and then the final piece was just to save that number and that address to a database so we could look it up later. And we ran this 238,000 times, one for each address. And it took probably the better part of a day for the program to complete all of these cycles. But at the end of it, we had something really interesting. We had a snapshot of what all of the water bills in Baltimore City looked like and where they were. And this was data that didn't exist anywhere, but was technically public. And so kind of, now that we have this data, what exactly do we do with it, right? So we were able to figure out a couple of things. First, we found 13,000 addresses with a water bill over $750. So these are all the houses that are at risk of tax sale, that will actually go to tax sale next year. And so we could then potentially reach out to them and say, look, at some point this is going to come to bite you. Let's take care of it now before the tax sale process gets started. We were also able to geocode all of the addresses and then put all those addresses on a map. So we created a nice heat map where you could see where the biggest problem areas lie. And then because we geocoded it, we were actually able to, down to the house level, figure out where all of these houses with really large water bills that were going to have their house sold at tax sale existed. So if you look at this map in the bottom right, we could have actually driven up to this neighborhood and gone to these 4 or 5 houses that have the red dots, which indicate a water bill over $750, knocked on the door and say, hey, we're from MVLS, and don't ask how we got your water bill, what we did, and we're here, to offer some assistance. Can we get payment plans? We can challenge the water bill. There's all kinds of things. And we've also been able to send letters to houses in poor zip codes that have water bills that are over a certain amount, saying, hey, you're at risk here. MVLS can help. Here's how we can help. And just as another kind of, so I gave the example of elderly people sometimes getting into trouble with water bills. But another example is if you're a renter and your landlord isn't paying your water bill, that house is still sold at tax sale. And then with some special circumstances, otherwise, if that house is sold at tax sale, you then get kicked out of that house. And so it can still be a problem for you, even if you're not the homeowner. And you might think your landlord is paying those water bills when in fact they're not. And so this can be something that can really detriment a lot of people very quickly. All right, so that was the first kind of web scraper example that I went over. I just want to stop to see if there's any questions here in the chat room, or if there's anything about the water bills before I go into the next piece here. Looks all quiet. All right.
Yep, I don't see any questions at this time.
All right. So the next big I see a wait here. So the question is, can a web scraper get past CAPTCHAs? And the answer is sometimes. You know, a CAPTCHA, and I talk about this a little bit later, so I'm not going to go too much onto it. While there are sometimes ways to get around CAPTCHAs, usually you probably shouldn't. CAPTCHAs are a pretty good way of telling you that the website doesn't want to be scraped. And so, you know, you take some risks when you purposely try to go around their protective measures. But I talk about that in a little bit. So the second big example we have here for web scrapers is with court data. So in Maryland, we have a public website that the government runs here where anybody can look up anybody's criminal or civil cases. It contains a vast wealth of information, millions of cases going back to about 1985, civil and criminal and traffic, all kinds of information here. So it's a real wealth, but there's no way to download the information. All you can do is search by the parameters they give you, and here are the parameters. If you can kind of see there, you can search by someone's name, and you can search by case number. But, you know, if you wanted to find all the people charged with marijuana possession, who were convicted, who lived in this zip code, you know, this website doesn't have the parameters for that, so you can't do it. So what we decided to do was build a program that scraped all of the data out from case search, and then we would be able to search by whatever parameters we wanted to. And so you'll notice that one of the parameters was to search by case number. And if you type in a case number, it will load up the information for that particular case, and it'll take you to that website. So for instance, we type in a case number here. This is a random John Smith that I found, and this is their criminal case. And as you can see, it has a wealth of information from addresses to tracking numbers, what they were charged with, what they received. And so this is how I approached the project. So we were going to build a web scraper that scraped this criminal case by case number. And so we built yet another web scraper. And so we followed a very similar method where we did, you know, we had a case number that we already knew. We activated this tool on Chrome in order to monitor the traffic that gets sent between the browser and the server. And we decided to mimic it. And so here's a kind of a screenshot of the information as it gets sent from the browser to the server. And you notice the important information is right here. And so this is where the case ID is the case number. So we were then able to build another program where it mimicked the data and it left the case ID as a variable that we could swap in with a new case number. Once we got that, we got the HTML back for that particular case. And then we had to build another little kind of piece of code here to go through all of the HTML and find all of the charge information, what they were charged with, what their name is, what their birth date is, and kind of parse it out from the HTML so we can save it into a database. This piece was significantly harder than on the Waterbill website. On the Waterbill website, we had a nice, easy ID tag that said this is where the current balance is. You know, it only took one line of code to find that value. It was not so easy with the case search information. Here's kind of just a little screenshot of it. But there you can see there's no ID tag. It just has, you know, a class tag, and classes are used to display the data in different ways. And so you know, you can have a class that displays the text as red or bigger or smaller, things like that. But ultimately, that didn't help us too much. So we had to build a very complex program here that was able to parse through all of the HTML and realize that this is the, you know, what they were charged with, this is what they received, this is how many years they got in prison. But we were able to do it. And then we built just another piece to save it to a database, which is fairly straightforward. So how did this loop work? So last time, we had a list of every address in Baltimore City that we could easily loop through. We didn't have a list of every case number because that didn't exist. In fact, we tried to go that route. I did a FOIA request to the judiciary to try to get a list of every case number. But ultimately, they deemed that project to be too time-consuming and the cost would be too high, so they denied that request. So we had to find another workaround. So what we did is we started with the earliest case number we could find. So we went on case search manually and just typed in some information to try to find some cases from 1985. And so we found a case number from 1985, and that became our starting case number. We kind of primed the web scraper that we just built with that first case number. The web scraper took that case number, went to the website, pulled the HTML for that particular case back, parsed through it all to get the description and the verdicts for all the charges and the defendant information, and saved it all into a database. And then once it was finished saving into a database, we simply added 1 to the end of the case number, and then gave that next case number back to the scraper. And this way, we were able to keep going forward, just adding 1 to the end of it until we ran out of case numbers, until we hit so many kind of, we programmed the web scraper to be able to identify if the case was not findable. If we searched a case number and nothing came up, we knew that something was off. And so when we hit a certain number of those, we realized that we had reached the end of, that we've reached the current day, so there's no more case numbers. And that worked fairly well. And we started from 1985, and we went all the way up to 2017, and we caught millions and millions and millions of cases. And so if we take a look at the total numbers here, we captured 5 million criminal cases, 2.5 million civil cases, and for civil, we only went back to about 2010. Over 3 million distinct people throughout all the criminal cases here. And it wasn't just defendant. We had information now on 3 million people, including defendants, attorneys, witnesses, police officers, anybody that might be related to a case. We now had a lot of data on. Can we make sure? Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question. So I see in the case number that there's the B, and so I was wondering, in some case numbers that letter will vary. You could have 2 letters depending on, what sort of database or court database you're searching. So did you run into that problem at all, and how did you resolve that?
So you're correct. I simplified a little bit of the case number incrementing that we did. And it took a lot of staring at lots of case numbers to figure out exactly how they're all incremented. So by adding 1, I kind of simplified it. But the B in the case number that you can see right here stands for Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And so each county has its own letter. And so in order to scrape every county, we actually had to, we scraped all of one letter, then we went back and scraped all of the next and all of the next, until we captured all 24 counties here in Maryland. Okay. And then you're right, while this system worked fairly well for district court, even though there were a couple of pockets where, the courts transitioned from one thing to another, and for some reason, it would just skip 1,000 cases or something like that. So it did take a little bit of trial and error. But what we really ran into trouble with was some of the circuit courts in Maryland. We captured their data as well, but circuit courts historically in Maryland have a lot of autonomy. And so they each had different case numbering systems. So we had to build a different incrementer one for Baltimore City Circuit Court, one for Montgomery County Circuit Court, one for Prince George's County Circuit Court. And that was added an extra kind of wrench into the whole system, but it was something that was surmountable.
So that's a great example, because it seems like in some places you have to do, just overall you have to do sort of an initial assessment of how complex the numbering system or the lettering system is, and then it could be as easy as adding 1, or possibly multiple letters over different years or different jurisdictions and things like that. Okay.
Right. And you will be surprised that once you start kind of diving into like, how a case number is incremented, just how few people actually know anything about it. Because we called a lot of courthouses to try to talk to a lot of clerks.
Yeah.
They all looked at me and said, we have no idea. The system just generates the next case number. And so, you
Wow.
finally have to find that one person in a back room somewhere who built it 20 years ago to try to help you explain it.
That sounds about right. That sounds about right. All right, thank you.
Yeah. That's a good question. So now that we had all of this data that we captured on millions of cases, and we made sure to capture every single piece of information that was on Case Search, which is the name of the website here. So everything you could see it was captured and stored in its own field so we could search by it. And you'll notice that the race of the defendant, the zip code, what they were charged with, and what they received are all part of what's on Case Search. And so with these 4 factors, we were able to actually create a little kind of interactive website where somebody could type in a particular crime in a particular zip code, pick a certain year, and see all of the race breakdown for everyone who was convicted of a charge in that particular area. And, of course, the statistics always kind of skew racially, which and that's no different in Baltimore. And that was eventually used. Unfortunately, our data wasn't actually used for it because we did it after the fact, but other data was used to show that, despite African Americans only making up a certain percentage in Baltimore City, they overwhelmingly received a majority of the marijuana citations or charges. And, the police didn't have a good explanation for that, and eventually it led to the decriminalization of marijuana here in Maryland. And so this data can have really impactful results. So this tool kind of helps dive into it a little bit further for historical purposes to figure out exactly how many zip codes, what was the race breakdown of a particular charge. And this is just what we chose. You could use this data to do almost anything. You could, even height and weight are on here. So you could see, how tall is the average, marijuana user. And so you can really get some really interesting data out there. We also captured all the civil cases, and we built this interactive tool that lets you look up the number or a particular plaintiff and see how many cases they had in a particular year and what the total judgments were for that particular year. So in Maryland here we have a group called Big Boys Bail Bonds that sues a ton of people. And in 2013 we were able to say, okay, they were involved in 1,700 cases in just that one year and received judgments of over $11 million. And so this was information that is not look-upable, if that's a word, anywhere else. You couldn't do a Freedom of Information request for it. You couldn't ask the courts for it. We're not even sure Big Boys Bail Bonds might have this information. And so it put a lot of data kind of at the fingertips that didn't exist before. So we were able to take this and actually go a little bit further and add some value to the data that we collected. So, I'm an attorney and I do a lot of criminal record expungement. And expungement is the removal of a criminal case from someone's criminal record. And in Maryland, conveniently, all the factors you need in order to determine whether a case is eligible for expungement or not is on Case Search, is on that case when you load up your case number. You can determine whether that case is eligible for expungement or not. And so I created a program that used kind of branch logic and different kind of algorithms to determine, based on the expungement law here in Maryland, to determine whether a particular case is eligible for expungement. And we ran that, once we developed that algorithm that just took a few inputs, right? It takes what you were charged with, what you received, when you received it, things like that. We ran that algorithm on every case that we had just downloaded. And so what were we able to do with that? So we suddenly had a list of every criminal case in Maryland that was eligible for expungement, which never existed before. We geocoded a bunch of the addresses, and we were able to create a map here in Baltimore City of every defendant's house with an eligible case for expungement. And this is a kind of a cross-section of Baltimore City, and each one of those pins is a person with an eligible case for expungement. And we were able to use this map to better target resources. So we sent out mailers to people. When we hold clinics, we use this map to figure out what the impact will be, or how to predict how many people will need that service in a particular neighborhood, and so we can adjust to how many attorneys we need to send in order to help with the load of people. And then this information can also be used kind of from a policy standpoint to advocate for better expungement rules for state legislators who don't know how big the problem is in their district can now go in and say, hey, wow, there's a lot of people in my district who would benefit from expungement. And we can also actually look up what the effect of certain laws would be. So because there's no state-sponsored database of expungible cases, nobody has any idea of if we added, let's say, the charge of theft to the expungement list, how many people would that help? How many cases would that make eligible, and how many extra staff members at the court would we need to hire to deal with the uptick in people? So it provides a lot of really powerful analytics and statistics that didn't exist before.
Matthew, I think we had a question. This might weave into a little bit later, but how do you get to the web scraper in Google was a question.
How do you get to the web scraper in Google?
I wonder if that...
You were saying that the Google has a setting that you could turn on and look and see how it translated the code?
Oh, I see. Yeah. So if you're using Chrome, I can show you here on has my browser popped up?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so this is just a regular Google page. For here, if you go up, it's in this, the easy way to do it is if you right-click anywhere and you click Inspect or Control-Shift-I, it will bring up this whole kind of tool right here. And it starts out in the Elements tab, where you can look through and find out all the different elements of the web page you're looking at, and this is all the HTML. And then if you click something called Network, this will monitor all the network that gets sent from your Chrome browser to whatever server you're interacting with. So if we then, great webinars, all this data comes up, and if just for simplistic purposes, this first one is usually what you're looking for because that holds the bulk of the data. And so when I ran that search, this is what was sent to Google. And so you can see it contains, here's some cookie information because Google tracks everything right. Here's my search phrase. Here's all of the information I use. So what you could do is you could try to mimic all of this information into a program and except just replace what some of the parameters are in order to find out your own kind of searches. And this is very simplistic. Websites work in a number of different ways. Not everything is easily scrapable. There's a lot of JavaScript that can asynchronously pull data from different sources. It could complicate the whole process. And so, some sites are more suited for scraping than others. Did that sound like an answer to?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and all of the browsers have one. Firefox has one. I'm sure Internet Explorer has one. Okay, so the two examples I've used so far are about kind of multi-web page lookup tools, or kind of using it in bulk to pull out an entire data set. But much like the kind of Trivago or the Venmo app, single-based web scrapers that just are meant to look for one thing and return it back and then just wait until it's called again, are also really powerful. And so I want to just go over two of the projects that we did with that, just to show you the other side of web scrapers when it comes to nonprofits. So the first one is a website I created called mdexpungement.com. And what this is it's kind of it combines all of the different aspects that we talked about before with the case search lookup. So because you can look up, we use the web scraper we developed to look up a case on case search, added that case number, to pull back the HTML, put all of that HTML into our algorithm, and then what we did is we created a website where you could actually type in your case number. So you're John Smith, you just went to a court hearing, and your case was thrown out or somehow ended, and you want to see if it's eligible for expungement. What you can do is you can now go to mdexpungement.com, type in your case number, and on the fly, the web scraper will take that case number, get the most recent data for it, and pass it through the algorithm to determine if it's likely eligible for expungement. This all takes a fraction of a second. And then what the website does is down here, if it's likely eligible, it'll tell you likely eligible for expungement. And we actually then took it a step further, which isn't covered here, but we populated all the forms you would need in order to file for expungement. And so in about 5 seconds, knowing nothing more than your case number, you can actually have the forms you need to file with the court in order to get your criminal case expunged. And it's been very helpful, and so far we've expunged with the website over 34,000 cases in the last 2 years.
Matthew, real quick, while you're switching slides, there was a question, just sort of a general language question. What language browser did you use? I'm partial to Beautiful Soup in Python 3 and Selenium, Phantom JS, I think that's what that says, but curious to know what you like.
Yeah, so it's a great tool. It's an advanced question there. So I am like you, I'm partial to Python. I've built these web scrapers in almost everything. A lot of it is PHP, which is, in my mind, a really great language for web scraping if you don't plan to do a lot of them. If you plan to run hundreds of thousands of them, you need to run a programming language that can do threading very well, and something like Python is then better. So I've built them in Python and Java and PHP. I have used Phantom JS as well. And Phantom JS is, in my mind, a little bit more complicated to use, and it can add on some significant time. So if you're running 1 million cases, that extra second that each one that it takes for each web scraper to pull can add on, an extra month of processing power. And so, just for everyone on the audience, that there's 2 kind of main pieces there. One is making a request kind of in a one fell swoop kind of way, which is usually what Python or PHP will do if you use a curl request or something. What Phantom JS does is actually more mimics how a human would interact with a website. And so for certain websites, not all of the information will be displayed at once. Some of the information will populate, especially if it's a lot of information. What the website will do is it will initially load the frame to hold all of the information and then bring the information to different pieces of that web page as it all loads. That way the person isn't waiting to see the website until everything's loaded. It's able to display it much faster. And kind of getting to the point of the whole thing is in those types of situations, you might need to use something like Phantom JS, which is more mimics a human using a web scraper and can actually wait until everything is done downloading from that web page and then cycle through it a little bit easier. But I find Phantom JS a little bit more tedious to use, and I think the added delay time it can be a real factor if you're trying to pull millions of cases. Okay, so now I've gone over all the great different, actually, sorry, I think I skipped a slide here. Okay, so the other big thing that we use web scrapers for here is to look up client information. And so let's say you're a client and you apply to MVLS for custody help, right? You need an attorney to represent you in a custody battle. Well, we at MVLS, we help with almost every civil legal issue. So what we do is after you fill out our MVLS form and that data gets put into our system, I've built a program that will automatically use all of these web scrapers to go out and look for other pieces of information you might have that kind of raise a red flag that might indicate that you have some other legal issues that need to be taken care of. So for example, we'll take your name and date of birth and search to see if you have any cases eligible for expungement. We'll see if you have a water bill that's above a certain amount to kind of trigger a warning to see if we can get you on a payment plan before it goes to tax sale. We check for potential tax credits. If you fall into certain income brackets and you own your house in certain counties, you can apply for certain housing tax credits, and we can check to see if you've already applied for them. And then we can check to see if you have other cases that you might not know about. So you come in for your custody suit that you're trying to get help with, but then while you're here, while we actually have you in front of us, we also help you with getting your cases expunged. We help challenge your high water bill. We get you some beneficial tax credits, and we inform you that, by the way, you're also being sued for some tort violation or some unpaid bill. Did you know about that? Do you have an attorney? Are you taking care of it, or do you need help with that as well? And so it's a very interesting, cool tool that kind of takes a holistic approach to helping the client. And we have a number of different ways that we can alert different people to it, right? So if you find something that's really pressing, you can send a text message to the client saying, hey, we found this, do you need help? Text back, yes, I need some help, or we can raise a flag with the attorney for the attorney to look into it a little bit deeper, or just simply make a case note of it for later analytical purposes. And so it's been very helpful in trying to catch some of these outlying legal issues that unfortunately a lot of our clients tend to have. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced everybody that web scraping is the way to go, but you want to be careful not to get on the wrong side of the law, which can sometimes be easier than you might think. So the first thing I want to talk about is a DOS attack. Now, what you're probably familiar with is a DDoS attack, which is what this is a picture of right here. Extra D stands for distributed denial of service. But when it's just one particular computer, which is making so many requests to a particular server that the server gets overwhelmed and can't handle requests from other legitimate traffic, that's called a DOS attack. And what might cause so much traffic? Well, somebody using a web scraper. Now, I will say that most servers, anything that's close to professional, should be able to handle as much traffic as one single computer can throw at it. However, it's something to take into consideration if what you're trying to scrape is a mom and pop website that might not be built that well or is fairly old, or some other website that maybe is built okay but gets so much traffic that the extra burden on the server might be too much. Because the last thing you want to do is cause some kind of harm to the server that's hosting the website and stop legitimate people from getting there. And so how do you take this into consideration? There's a number of different ways. One, you could always call the people hosting the website, although most people don't tend to take kindly to you trying to download their whole database. Another way is you can, what kind of website is it, or who hosts it? Is this a state-run website that should have the infrastructure to hold it, or is it mom and pop? And then what's important is you can add a time delay in between your scraping. So for instance, with the property scraper, when we scraped out all the water bill data, we added a time delay of a second in between each search. And so, in an attempt to not overload their system, because we didn't want to stop other people from looking up their water bills. And so we basically said, all right, web scraper, after you search this address, pause for 1 second, and then search the next one. And that's a good way of making sure that you don't try to overload the system. And that's what Google recommends as their recommended time in between scraping. So if Google comes to your site and scrapes your site, it'll do it at 1 second per page. The next big thing is terms of use. So the legal area here is very gray. Whether a website can prevent somebody from using a web scraper through a terms of use is a legal gray area depending on how you're using it, whether you're overloading their system, whether how prominent the terms and conditions are displayed. So there's a number of factors that go into it, so I don't want to give any legal advice on that. But my recommendation is simply don't violate the terms of use. If they say, you know, you're prohibited from using robots, web scrapers, anything like that, I would usually respect that request. Because the last thing, even if maybe you're legally in the right, you don't want 10 years of legal court cases to figure that out. And so this is a screenshot of a website here in Maryland that prohibits robot collection and web scraping. And it's displayed very prominently, so we've never scraped them. And so it's a very good example of what these look like. So this is CAPTCHAs, and this kind of goes back to the same question that we had before. And the CAPTCHAs are a pretty good sign that they don't want you to scrape their website, right? CAPTCHAs are images that are very difficult for computers to read, and therefore stops web scrapers from using a website. So while there are ways to get around CAPTCHAs, there's all kinds of tools to be able to read what that word is and type it in, or at least make a number of different guesses, and you get 75% success rate or something like that. The same kind of legal issues come up where the website is making it fairly clear that they don't want to be scraped, and you're doing it anyways. So, you know, if you come across this, I wouldn't scrape it. The other thing is authorized access. You know, in my mind, public information is fair game that anybody could go to. But if you find a security vulnerability, you don't want to then, you know, say, oh, this is great, I can access all the information for all the accounts because they didn't realize that you can do X, Y, and Z, and you know, figure out somebody else's account information. You know, unauthorized access to a computer will get you in trouble under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and so you want to stick to what they make very easy and obvious that people can access. So it's just something to think about, that even though you might have the technical ability to do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it. So hopefully everyone is now, I didn't scare too many people away from it, and everyone's on board for building their own web scraper. So there's a couple of ways to do it. If you don't have any coding experience, there are a number of online user-friendly tools that can help you build a web scraper without any actual code. There's things like webscraper.io. I'm always a little bit weary of these. I think these are great tools if you, you know, kind of want to just test out what a web scraper is to get a better understanding and see what goes into building it. You know, as with anything, using a kind of nice, friendly interface is going to limit how complex and detailed a web scraper can be. So I don't know if I'd use it for like you know, an industrial actual web scraping tool, but it can be a good place to go to learn how web scrapers work. The DIY method, right? If you're motivated now to build your own web scraper, you need a working knowledge of HTML to be able to figure out how to parse through some of that information, SQL in order to store the information in a database, and then you need some kind of programming language like Python, which is what I tend to use most frequently for web scraping. And then depending on the website, you might want to learn something like JavaScript, so you can use something like Phantom.js, which is a headless browser. And then if everything I said went over your head and you're one of those people who say this is simply not for me, there are lots of people who already have this knowledge conveniently. And so you can use websites like Freelancer to find a freelancer who can build you these kind of things. If you search in your search terms for things like web scraping and data mining, you can find different people that have those skills. And so I've screenshotted just somebody who had these skills. And this is a perfect example of the skills that you need in order to be a good web scraper. And so this person has a background knowledge in PHP and Python. They understand HTML. They know MySQL, so they can store it all. And then not only that, they have experience in actually web scraping and crawling. And this person is only $30 per hour, which is almost too good to be true, because that's a really good price for someone who knows all of this and has many years of all this experience. And so there are ways to find people to build these small projects. And so that's pretty much the end of my presentation. If you're curious if you have a website that you're thinking about scraping, or some questions about web scraping, or how I built some of the projects, especially if you have like the difference between Python or Phantom.js and things like that, you know, that may be slightly more complex than what this presentation was for, feel free to email me. I love talking about this stuff. It's not going to be a burden at all. You know, and while I might not be able to build the project for you, I'd be happy to take a look at a website to see what, you know, whether this is going to be something extremely hard or really easy to build.
Great. Matthew, thank you very much. Before you go, can you, the last thing I want to do is allow people to provide some feedback. So if you could drag that, I like to call it the magic ball, over to my name. I'm going to launch a poll. Oh, Jason, all right, Jason grabbed it. So Jason's going to launch the poll, and there it is. And then if everybody who's still here could fill this out and give us some feedback, we would greatly appreciate it. And Matthew, thank you again so much for this webinar. It was really interesting. And we will post this and have this up tomorrow. So thank you, everyone.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.